Our girl wakes up in a cave, feeling water dripping from the ceiling. She reaches up and touches her face, slowly opening her eyes. As she looks around, she notices the air is really hot. She takes in her surroundings and realizes she's still alive. Confusion fills her mind, and she wonders where she is. Her eyes wander, and she spots a skull lying on the ground. Instinctively, she covers her mouth with her hand, fear rushing through her. Then, memories start flooding back. She remembers she's in the dragon's cave. Her heart races as she remembers everything that happened to bring her here. She thinks of Marcellus Selen, the divergent king, and Princess Tina. Shina, the princess, had fled the country, and she was supposed to be executed. But then, the new queen, who's also her older sister, shows mercy. To keep the peace in the kingdom of Posital, the queen convinces her younger sister to offer herself to the dragon in Black Rock Cave. She can still hear the ceremony in her mind. The sacrificial bread had been placed, and they made a plea to the dragon to protect Posital. She also remembers Princess Shina, trapped in a container, crying. Her older sister cries too, while Ansel, someone who is there, comforts her and tells her not to be scared. Even though she's reassured, she can't help but feel that she hasn't betrayed her country. Back in the cave, she wipes away the tears from her face. She realizes she's still alive. The dragon hasn't come back yet, so she's safe for now, but it won't be for long. Staying here any longer is dangerous. This place is full of sacrifices, and she has to leave. She decides to find somewhere safe to hide. As she walks, she sees something from a distance. She notices a breeze and thinks there might be a way out. But the cave is dark, and it's hard to see. She moves closer and finds a man lying on the ground, badly hurt. She's shocked and wonders who he is. His injuries look serious, and she realizes he's barely alive. His heartbeat is so weak. He's in worse shape than she is. She pauses, unsure of what to do. Should she help him or leave him? She doesn't know. She sits beside him, looking up and thinking about what to do. She realizes she might not be able to get out of the cave alone, but she's determined to help him, so she decides to do her best to save him. Even though she's exhausted, she gathers what little strength she has left and starts to use the holy healing spell. She presses her hands together and focuses as she touches his head. That's when she sees the bone spike sticking out of his body. It's the cause of his injury. Carefully, she pulls it out and throws it aside. Then she focuses on stopping the bleeding and healing the wound. It's hard, but she manages to close the wound, even though she's so tired. The man starts to stir and opens his eyes. She feels a wave of relief, thinking he's awake now. But before she can react, his eyes begin to glow. Suddenly, without warning, he shoves her away and bites her neck. The sharp pain makes her cry out, telling him it hurts. But then, just as suddenly, he falls back against her and passes out. She's confused, not understanding why he's unconscious again. She gently pushes him aside, so he can lie down more comfortably. She touches his chest and feels his heartbeat. It's stronger now, and she feels relieved, knowing she has succeeded in helping him. She quietly says to herself that it's good because she's not alone in the cave anymore. Feeling drained and weak, she lies down next to him and holds her stomach. But soon after, she starts vomiting blood. The pain gets worse and suddenly, a dragon tattoo appears on her shoulder. It's a beautiful, detailed design that glows as it marks her skin. Weak and overwhelmed by everything, she can't move anymore. She stays there, unable to do anything else. The man beside her, the one who had bitten her, suddenly wakes up. He sits up and sees her lying nearby. At first, he can't believe it, she's human. He tries to use his power, but nothing happens. He realizes his magic doesn't work. He's still alive, but is stuck in a human form. He looks at her again, thinking about what she did earlier. Could this fragile little human really have saved him? As she lies there, she starts mumbling in her sleep. Her voice is soft, but he can hear her clearly saying something about feeling cold. He's confused. Was her condition from an illness, or did saving him do this to her? Unsure of what to do, he tries to cast a spell to help her, but it fails. He realizes that he has no power left, not even enough to heal himself. She keeps murmuring quietly, talking about the pain she's feeling and how cold it is. He watches her, frustrated by how weak and delicate humans seem compared to what he's used to. Then he notices the dragon symbol on her shoulder, marking her skin. With the last bit of energy he has left, he lights a small flame with his fingers. The fire flickers in the dark cave, and he sees how bad his situation is. He thinks to himself that it's pathetic, having to rely on someone so fragile to stay alive. But as he looks at her, he can't deny that the mark on her shoulder means something. He feels a strange responsibility for her now, like she belongs to him. In the cave, he manages to start a fire, carefully stacking firewood beside them to keep it burning. He lies down next to her and watches her sleep, thinking about everything that's happened. His flames may not be what they once were, but they still have some use. He looks up at the top of the cave, wondering if he will ever be able to fly freely in the sky again. Slowly, he closes his eyes, lost in thought, thinking about what's next for both of them. She suddenly wakes up, snapping out of her sleep. Her hand instinctively moves to his chest, where the injury had been. She sits up weakly, rubbing her face, trying to sort through her thoughts. She remembers where she is and mutters to herself about being in the dragon's cave. She recalls how she saved the man beside her. Then she complains about the strange tribe that sacrifices people, even without giving them clothes. With shaky hands, she uses her cape to cover him up. He opens his eyes, and she freezes in shock. She asks if he was also sacrificed to the dragons, mentioning how badly hurt he was the day before. He touches his head, trying to remember the human language he once knew. As he focuses, his mind begins to adjust to the language again. Sitting on the ground with her legs folded, she holds her knees and asks him his name and where he's from, what kingdom or tribe he comes from. He stands up, removes the cape she gave him, and holds it in his hand. He introduces himself, saying his name is Aligalak, then adds a quick farewell. She responds with her own name, Shina, but she thinks to herself that she shouldn't use her real name so casually. She repeats his name slowly, carefully, and then mentions finding clues that might help them plan. As she moves forward, holding his hand, she talks about the sacrifices made to the dragons, food, silk, and other offerings. He stands behind her with his arms folded, silently thinking about how humans keep throwing things into his cave. He wonders what's wrong with them. She opens a container and mentions that she's going to find something for him to wear. While she searches through it, he notices the mark on her shoulder and raises his hand, wanting to touch it. He realizes that the mark means she's also been chosen as a sacrifice for him. Just as he's about to touch her, she quickly turns around and hands him a shirt, telling him it should fit. He takes the shirt and asks if he really has to wear it. She insists, reminding him that she saved his life and that they can't stay in the cave. She urges him to change quickly, warning him that staying there is dangerous. He asks what kind of danger she's talking about, and she explains that the dragon could return at any moment. While she sits down, he moves behind a rock to change into the clothes she gave him. As he gets dressed, he thinks about the dragon, wondering how long he'll have to stay in the cave. He also wonders if humans think of him as an evil being. Once he's dressed, he asks if he put the clothes on right. She turns to look at him, and when their eyes meet, he thinks about how unreasonable she seems. But he also realizes that she's the one who saved him from the dragon she spoke about with fear. In the damp cave, water keeps dripping steadily from the crystal above. He stretches his hand out, catching a drop as it falls. Moving closer, he sees her lying weakly. She whispers, saying she's thirsty. Gently, he pours the water from his palm into her mouth, trying to help ease her pain. He reminds her of their plan to escape, but then admits that her illness has slowed them down. With a sigh, he reflects on how fragile humans can be. Then, he suddenly stops and chuckles, realizing that he, too, is now one of them. He speaks softly again, telling her that he owes his life to her, just like she owes hers to him. He encourages her to keep remembering her dreams. As she rests in his arms, she starts muttering in her sleep. Her voice calls out a name, Ansel. He frowns, wondering who this Ansel could be. At the same time, in her dream, she finds herself back in the past, chasing after a boy. She runs after him, asking him to wait. He stops and turns to look at her, asking why they are there. Before they can say more, another voice calls out to them. It's Master Varenzel, who says they need to continue their lesson on holy healing. The boy responds excitedly, ready to learn more. The dream changes, and now she and the boy are sitting by a window. She asks him if he wants to become a high priest when he grows up. He says yes, and as they sit there, their hands are holding each other. She declares that one day she'll be queen and asks him to protect the kingdom with her. He agrees, promising that they'll protect it together. Suddenly, the dream takes a darker turn. She feels a sharp pain in her head, and she wakes up with a start. She looks around and sees her mentor lying on the ground. A sword is stuck in his chest, and there's blood everywhere. Shocked, she covers her mouth, wondering how this could have happened. She tries to heal him, but nothing works. Panic rises in her chest as she realizes that something dark has affected him, and it's blocking her holy healing magic. Her mind is spinning with confusion as she remembers wanting to ask her mentor about her past. But as soon as she entered the sanctuary, something had thrown her off. While she kneels beside him, soldiers and others start to arrive, including her older sister. One of the soldiers speaks to her, calling her a princess and asking what happened. He points to her teacher and accuses her of killing him. She tries to explain herself, asking why he would think she or her mentor would do such a thing. Marcellus, someone else in the group, suggests that her troubled past might have caused her to act this way, but she didn't need to go this far. Tears fill her eyes as she denies the accusation, insisting that she only wanted to talk to her mentor, and had invited her friend, Ansel, to support her. Ansel, however, avoids her gaze and holds her sister close, making excuses for why he wasn't there during the whole incident. The feeling of betrayal stings, and her thoughts turn bitter. Ever since she found out the truth about her identity, everything has been falling apart. The man speaking to her says, she's lost her mind and orders her to be subdued. That's when it hits her. It's all a setup. A trap she walked right into without realizing it. Her accuser continues, accusing her of using dark magic and committing treason. He demands her punishment by the purifying flames of a dragon and orders her to be thrown into the black rock cave. Back in reality, she stirs in his arms, muttering things that don't make sense. Her lips form the words, evil dragon, and he looks at her curiously. She speaks again, this time saying, another evil dragon. His expression changes as he listens to her last words, where she challenges him, warning him that if he keeps calling her that, she'll show him just how evil she can truly be. As she lies there, he looks down at her and speaks softly, wondering why she calls him an evil dragon. He says he hasn't done anything bad to humans. But then, he stops for a moment, thinking to himself that maybe he's done a little wrong. He remembers when he was a dragon and burned down human buildings. He pushes the thought away, telling himself he hasn't broken any ancient human laws. While holding her, he says he hasn't even done anything to her yet. He starts thinking again, about how he used to enjoy playing in human lands. Maybe, he wonders, he might have made a mistake. As he gets lost in his thoughts, an old memory comes back to him. A long time ago, when he was still a dragon, someone rushed to him, urgently telling him that his father was dying. He quickly returned to Dragon Island, but by the time he got there, his father had already passed away. He feels a deep regret, wishing he could have seen his father one last time. He remembers how his father's body had started to show signs of decay a while ago. He had asked his uncle about it, and his uncle told him not to worry, that it wasn't serious. Then, out of nowhere, his uncle and a group of other dragons showed up. His uncle said that since he liked human lands so much, maybe he should just become a human forever. Before he could react, they all worked together to transform him into a human. That was when he felt the sharp pain of a dragon's tooth piercing his chest, sealing the change. He suddenly opens his eyes and realizes it was all just a dream. She asks if he's okay, saying he looks like he's trapped in a nightmare. She stands up and takes his hand. He touches his head and says he's fine, warning her not to waste her strength on him, because she might get sick again. She reassures him, saying she's not that weak, but then she shows concern, saying they can't heal slowly in such a dangerous place. She reminds him about the threat of the dragon's return, saying they'll all die if they stay here. She talks about what happened to the sacrifices in the large cave and insists they need to find a way out, fast. She places her hand on his shoulder and tells him she wants to go home. When he hears this, he thinks about home too, and silently promises himself he'll reclaim what's his. He takes her hand and says they need to find a way out. She hesitates for a moment and asks how he knows what to do. He explains that while she was sleeping, he scouted ahead to find the way out. She looks surprised, but she accepts his explanation, though he warns her that the path might be tough. She comments on how rough it might be as they start moving. She uses her light to brighten the way while holding onto him with her other hand. He comments that since she's so afraid of dragons, he doesn't mind staying human for a while. As they walk, they come to a spot where they need to jump across. He counts down, holding her hand. When the moment comes, they jump together. Moving further, they reach another gap, but this one is much wider. She hesitates and says it's too far. Without a second thought, he picks her up in his arms and tells her to hold on tight if she's scared. She asks what he's doing, but before she can say anything else, he leaps across the gap with her. She cries out in surprise as they land on the other side. He calmly replies that, of course, he's just trying to find a way out. As they jump, he holds her tightly in his arms. They land on a spot, but the surface cracks beneath them and starts to crumble. Without hesitation, he jumps again, landing on another surface. As he gets ready to leap once more, she, still in his arms, warns him to be careful. He reassures her to hold on tight, as he prepares for the next jump. She continues shouting in fear as he leaps up again, finally landing on a safe, stable surface. Sweat drips down his face, and he thinks about how weak he feels in his human form. The exhaustion hits him hard, something he hadn't really noticed before. But as she looks up at him, still in his arms, she's amazed by his strength. She wonders how someone so powerful could have been sacrificed to a dragon and suffered such terrible injuries. He gently sets her down, letting her stand on her own. He asks if she's scared and if she can still walk. She tells him she can, thanking him for helping her. He reminds her of his promise to get her out and tells her not to waste time. He takes her hand and starts leading the way. She follows closely behind, thinking about how lucky she is to have saved him. She admits to herself that she wouldn't have been able to escape the cave on her own. But once they are outside, she plans to rely on herself. When they finally make it out of the cave, the bright sunlight makes her squint a little. She feels a huge wave of relief and hugs him tightly, happy they've escaped. Watching her, he thinks their journey wasn't really that hard. She thanks him from the bottom of her heart for all the help he's given her. After stepping back, she clasps her hands together and asks if he's also going home. He turns the question back on her, asking where she plans to go. She thinks about the nearest safe place, the Highland Barracks, which is guarded by General Sedian, someone who's loyal to her. Deciding this is her best bet, she tells him she wants to go southwest, toward her home. He agrees to go the same way. Surprised, she hesitates, but then follows as he takes her hand, saying they should start heading out. As they walk, she thinks about his injuries and wonders if he can go back to where he's from. She figures that might mean they'll be together for a while. After walking for some time, she stops him and points out that her destination is far away, and walking is too slow. She spots some horses nearby and suggests they use them, mentioning that she can train them. He looks at the animals, remembering how he used to think of them as food. She approaches one of the horses carefully, holding out a piece of fruit. The horse takes the fruit and starts eating it, and she gently pats its face, talking to it softly. But suddenly, another horse rushes toward her, as if it might knock her over. He acts quickly, grabbing her and pulling her out of the way. The two horses start fighting over the fruit she gave, causing a bit of chaos. He steps forward, deciding to take control. He approaches the horses and uses his natural authority, telling one of them to move away. The horse listens and runs off in the distance. He turns to her and says that the black horse has gotten away, and suggests they ride the white one since she has already calmed it down. They both get on the horse and start riding again, picking up the pace on their journey. After riding for a while, they come to a spot by the river and decide to take a break. She picks up an apple, noticing how big it is, and suggests they rest for a bit and eat. While she gathers a few more apples, Ollie stands nearby with his arms crossed. He watches her but thinks to himself that he'd rather have some meat. Suddenly, something in the water catches their attention. Out of nowhere, a creature jumps out, aiming straight for Shina, who is standing near the edge of the river. Without thinking, he quickly grabs the creature with his hand, holding it tight. He asks if they can eat it, but Shina quickly explains that it's a fish monster, and it's both dangerous and poisonous. Realizing the danger, he throws the creature back into the water. He grabs an apple, takes a bite, and starts walking away. She watches him, wondering why anyone would want to eat something so scary. After their short break, they continue their journey and eventually reach the Highland camp. From where they are on the horse, they can see two guards standing by the gate. She tells him they've arrived and thinks about General Sedian, who has been stationed at the camp for a long time. She feels reassured by the loyalty of the soldiers under his command, but she reminds herself to stay cautious. She puts on a cape, covering most of her body so that only her eyes are visible. She gets off the horse and asks him to wait, while she goes up to the gate. The guards stop her and ask who she is and what she's doing. She introduces herself as Vassala Lang and asks to speak with General Sedian. The guards question her further, but before she can answer, Aligalak steps forward, which makes the guards hurry off to tell their leader. Inside, Sedian is reading when the guards bring him the message. At first, he brushes it off, saying he doesn't know anyone by that name. But when he hears it again, he stops, remembering something from the past. He recalls teaching a young Shina how to ride a horse. She had told him about her dream of entering an equestrian competition, and he had agreed to help her under the name Vassala Lang. The memory confirms his suspicions, and he quickly heads to the gate. When he arrives and sees her standing there, he is so moved that it brings tears to his eyes. He calls out to her, but she corrects him, asking him to call her Miss Shina. He takes her hand, kisses it, and agrees to her request. Standing behind her, he manages a small smile. Sedian, curious about who Aligalak is, asks about him. She tells him that they both escaped from the dragon's cave together. Sidian doesn't recognize the name, but says nothing about it. She adds that it's lucky he was there because it helped her escape. But as she speaks, she suddenly collapses. He calls her name in alarm, and Aligalak quickly catches her before she hits the ground. He explains that she's exhausted and still recovering from her injuries. Holding her gently, he looks down at her with concern. The general, realizing what's going on, apologizes for rushing things and promises to find a place for them to rest. He mentions breakfast and says they can talk more later. Just as they are about to leave, she opens her eyes a little and tells them they are safe now in the camp. Princess Shina lies on the bed, still unconscious, with Aligalak, General Sidian, and another man standing around her. The general looks at the man and asks how she's doing. The man replies that he's treated all of her external injuries, but her mental strength is very weak. Aligalak stands beside her, arms folded, staring at her. He thinks to himself about how she saved him. The man then turns to the general and suggests they might need priests and holy healing to help her recover faster. He looks at the princess and says he'll think about it. He tells the man he can leave. Aligalak, still standing by the bed, asks General Sidian why they don't call a priest to heal her. The general looks at him, thinking about how much the princess seems to trust him. He answers that he has doubts about the character of the priest, Kita, who was sent there. Without hesitation, Aligalak says that if the priest tries anything, he'll slap his neck. The general glances at him, then looks over at Dima, wondering if he's a foreigner. He wonders if the man was sent to the dragon, because he's too brutal. The general then says he'll arrange for a maid to take care of Princess Shina. Aligalak sits next to the princess, holding her hand gently. He speaks to her, asking if this is her home and saying she should have called someone to help her. He even tells her it would have been better if she had stayed in the cave with him. His thoughts drift back to when they arrived at the camp, remembering how the general had kissed the princess's hand. He starts to clean her hand carefully as he sits there, lost in thought. In General Sidian's office, he talks to the man who treated the princess earlier. He tells him that he'll leave things to the man's wife now. The man assures him everything will be fine. With his hand on his head, General Sidian thinks about how there are hardly any women at the border camp. Thankfully, Aisha, the adjutant's wife, has been helping with the border branch, so he trusts her to handle things without any issues. Meanwhile, at the farm, Dora asks Aisha if she can go with her. Aisha tells her to stop messing around. Dora complains that the place is boring, and Aisha responds that the military camp isn't a place for fun, and tells her to stay there and wait. Dora, still unhappy, says they traveled all this way, and all they got was a ranch full of cows, sheep, and horses. Back at the camp, the gate opens, and a guard calls out, letting Lady Aisha through. When the carriage stops, the door opens and Dora steps out. She's surprised to see Aisha and calls her name. Dora answers that she's coming with her. Aisha is a bit shocked and asks why she's there. Dora says she heard Aisha was there to take care of an injured noble lady and promises she won't cause any trouble. Aisha, not happy but willing to let her come, tells Dora to stay close and keep quiet. Dora agrees. Aisha tells one of the guards to show Dora to the ladies' room, and the guard leads the way. When they arrive, Aligalak is standing by the door, his arms folded. The guard tells Aisha she can go in, so she walks inside and calls out to Dora, telling her to hurry. Dora follows, happy that this is much better than being stuck on the ranch with cows, sheep, and horses. Inside the room, Aisha gently puts a towel on Princess Shina's face, sighs, and says, "Poor child." She dips the towel into a bowl of water again, then tells Dora to help her take off the princess's dress, so she can clean her up. Dora agrees and starts to take off the dress. As she does, she notices a dragon mark on the princess's shoulder and gasps, saying, "This is." Dora carefully sets down the princess's clothes and jewelry, just like Lady Aisha told her to. As she places them down, her mind drifts to the luxurious silk dresses, expensive jewelry, and even the crown in front of her. She looks at the princess, who is being cleaned by Aisha, and then her thoughts return to the dragon mark on the princess's shoulder. She wonders if this is the same woman who was once offered as a sacrifice to the evil dragon. She turns to Aisha and asks, "Auntie, what kind of noble lady needs you to take care of her personally? Could it be the traitor?" Aisha quickly responds, warning Dora to be careful with her words. She reminds Dora that she made a promise and to keep quiet and focus on her work. Dora nods, agreeing quietly, and goes back to her task. After the cleaning was done, Lady Aisha tells Dora that General oversees everything in the area and has his own plans, so they don't need to worry too much about it. Dora nods, understanding what she means. As they step out of the room, they notice Aligalak standing and watching them. Lady Aisha explains that after the princess was cleaned up and treated with medicine, she was feeling much better. She says she will come back in the morning to check on her again. Dora, seeing Aligalak, turns to him and introduces herself. "Hello, my name is Dora." "I also," but before she can finish, Lady Aisha calls out to her, telling her to follow. Dora quickly agrees and starts following Lady Aisha as they leave. Meanwhile, Aligalak enters the room to check on the princess. He smirks, knowing that his hearing is much sharper than the humans around him. He overhears Dora's comment about the princess being a traitor and a sacrifice. While holding the princess's hair as she lies unconscious, Aligalak talks to himself, thinking about the idea of treason and sacrifice. Even though the princess is hurt, she still managed to save him, and he can't help but admire her courage. Elsewhere, General Sidian thanks Lady Aisha for her help. She humbly replies that it was her duty to do so. They both watch the unconscious princess as General Sidian sighs heavily, saying that the princess is too much to handle. Lady Aisha, standing behind him, simply nods in agreement. What they don't realize is that a girl is standing just behind the door, quietly listening to their conversation. Lady Aisha mentions someone who has complete control in the capital, someone no one can challenge. The girl, hiding behind the door, can't help but think that these people are like usurpers who've taken over the palace they once called home. As she watches the princess, she realizes their fates are strangely similar. But she's determined that if she gets the chance, she'll fight back. Outside the princess's room, Dora walks back and forth, her mind racing. She wonders if Lady Aisha knows the princess inside is the traitor. She thinks about the princess's sentencing and how many people were unhappy with it, only to be killed by Marcellus Selin. She worries about what might happen if the princess's children are exposed. She's afraid she might be blamed too, and she definitely doesn't want to die. Just then, Lady Aisha comes out of the room and calls her name, snapping Dora out of her thoughts. Lady Aisha tells her to bring the medicine carefully, and Dora agrees before heading off to get it. As she walks, she repeats over and over to herself, "I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. I don't know anything, I don't want to die." Suddenly, she bumps into the priest. The priest turns and asks why she's in such a hurry, looking at her confused. Still panicking, Dora remembers that Lady Aisha had once mentioned that a priest had been sent to inspect military discipline in the capital. She wonders if this is the same priest, and doesn't want to get involved. If the prince finds out, it wouldn't be her fault. Dora quickly runs past the priest, telling him that she was just called to help with a seriously injured noble lady and needs to get back to her duties. She hurries off, leaving the priest behind. The priest watches her leave and murmurs to himself about the noble lady in the camp. He knows that General Sidian follows Marcellus's orders on the surface, but he also knows where Sidian's true loyalty lies. He finds the whole situation interesting, as he watches Dora disappear down the hallway. The general steps away, and gives instructions to the guards outside Princess Shina's room. He tells them to watch carefully, and they reply, "Understood, General." Meanwhile, Priest Carter stands off to the side, thinking deeply. He wonders why the guards are needed if the princess is just an ordinary noble lady. But before he can think more, he sees Dora coming towards him. He reaches out to her, and with a quick motion, begins to perform a spell. Dora is startled and calls out, "Reverend Priest." The priest turns to her calmly and says that, as a priest, it's his job to heal the wounded. But, he notes, the princess's injury doesn't seem that bad. If it was serious, the general would have called him in for holy healing instead of asking her to make soup and medicine. Dora explains that the princess is badly injured and still unconscious, but she doesn't understand why the general asked her to help. The priest looks at her, waiting for more, but she just shakes her head and says she doesn't know anything. He smiles reassuringly and tells her not to be afraid. He says he knows she's a good person, and that he doesn't want her to get caught up in something dangerous, or even lose her life. He leans in closer and warns her not to get involved in things she doesn't fully understand. Back in Princess Shina's room, Aligalak is sitting next to her when she wakes up. She smiles, surprised she has slept for so long. She tells him she feels much better now, but he says she's still too weak. She touches his chest and says she'll check his injury again later. He tells her it's nothing to worry about and reassures her that he's fine. Now that she's awake, he says she should focus on taking care of herself. Dora enters the room with the medicine and sets it down on the table. As she does, she can't help but think how strange the situation is. She finds it hard to believe that this so-called noble princess is acting so familiar with a stranger. She thinks to herself that she wouldn't do that if she were in the same position. Before Dora entered the room, the priest had approached her again. He tells her that someone like her, a good person, shouldn't get mixed up in all the problems going on around them. But, he says, if she does him a small favor, he could help her out. He hands her something, and when she asks what it is, he assures her that she won't get hurt. Back in the room, Dora holds the medicine in her hand and tells Princess Shina that she's brought it for her. Shina reaches for the medicine, but Dora hesitates for a moment, holding it tightly. The princess asks if something is wrong, and Dora quickly says no. The princess then smells the medicine and remarks that it has a strange smell. Sitting up, Princess Shina thinks that people chosen by the general shouldn't cause any trouble. The general helps her drink the medicine, while Dora watches closely. As Shina drinks it, Dora opens her hand, revealing an eye on her palm. Outside the room, the priest sees everything through the eye. He watches as the princess drinks the medicine and realizes it's really her. The priest then ties a message to a bird's leg and sends it flying out the window. As the bird flies off, the priest thinks about who needs to get this news. The message is meant for Moselis Selen. Princess Shina wakes up and sees the general standing beside her. He smiles and gently kisses her hand, happy that she's awake. She reassures him, saying she's fine now. Aligalak is standing quietly by the door, watching them. The princess asks the general how things are going in the capital. His face turns serious as he answers. He tells her that Archpriest Verensel is dead, and that she was sacrificed. The loyalists to the royal family have either been killed or forced into hiding. Moselis Selen now controls the kingdom, and his soldiers are everywhere. Meanwhile, in the capital, a messenger arrives with news. The delegation from the dwarfs has reached the port. The news is passed on to Princess Shina's older sister, Tina. Then Moselis Selen walks out, giving orders for officials to be arranged to welcome the delegation, and for a banquet to be held that evening. The guard quickly acknowledges his orders. Moselis thinks to himself that the druids, who have always stayed in their valley and kept to themselves, are coming now because of their old friendship with the late king. He's curious about how they will react when they see Princess Shina, who is now under his control. Back in the room, the general tells Princess Shina the latest news. He says she will attend the throne ceremony, and at the same time, her wedding to Ansel will take place. She is shocked and looks down, feeling a wave of sadness. Quietly, she says she wants to be alone, and the general agrees to leave her. He steps out of the room, but Arligalak, who has been standing by the door, stays behind. He starts to think about the name Ansel, wondering where he's heard it before. It feels familiar, like someone from a strange dream he once had. He steps into the room, and the princess, still sitting, calls out his name. She asks him about the ritual, confused about why she has been chosen to be the sacrificial bride for the evil dragon. Arligalak, a little amused, tells her that it's a ritual where young, beautiful girls are sacrificed to the dragon for protection. He looks at her, slightly puzzled, and wonders if this means they are already married. He covers his mouth, thinking to himself about how humans never bother to ask for his opinion. Meanwhile, in the palace, Mosellisellen receives a note from Priest Carter. He opens it, reading the words on the paper. As he reads, he mutters to himself and tightens his grip on the note. It's a message from the Highlands, with the priest's name mentioned. Mosellis's eyes narrow as he processes the words. He realizes that despite his efforts to kill her, Princess Shina is still alive. He squeezes the note tightly in his hand and mutters her full name, Shina Posital. He swears that this time, she won't escape. The night is quiet, with knights standing watch on a cliff. One of them points toward the distant lights, and says it's the Highland camp. Inside the camp, Dora stands by a window, looking outside. Her thoughts are all over the place, as she wonders if everything will really be okay that night. She turns away from the window and walks over to Arligalak. She tells him that General Sidian wants to talk to him about the princess's safety and urges him to go right away. Arligalak pauses for a moment, glancing at the guards standing by the door, then leaves the room. Now that the room is empty, Dora steps inside. She looks at the princess, who is still sleeping peacefully in bed. In her mind, she blames the princess for coming back and causing trouble for them. Slowly, she reaches out and places a lantern on the windowsill. As she does this, her thoughts drift back to Priest Carter's words from earlier. He had told her not to be afraid, assuring her that he only wanted to help clear her name. He had promised that he would make sure she wouldn't be harmed. He reminded her that she used to be just a farmer's daughter. If she could make a real contribution, Mosellisellen would reward her by making her a noble. He had painted a picture of a future where she, noble Miss Dora, could have anything she wanted. Shaking herself back to the present, Dora whispers to herself that she's not doing anything wrong, she's just making her contribution. Feeling determined, she picks up the princess's tiara and puts it on her own head. She looks at her reflection in the mirror and calls herself Noble Miss Dora, imagining a future where she has everything she's ever wanted. She pictures Arligalak looking at her and praising her for being the first to see the danger and ask for help. Smiling at the thought, she places her hands on her cheeks and realizes she wants him more than anything. Overcome with emotion, Dora runs out of the room, still wearing the tiara, leaving the lantern on the windowsill. Outside, the knights notice the light shining from the window and recognize the room. They quickly rush toward it, ready for action. Meanwhile, Arligalak, on his way to meet the general, suddenly stops. He wonders why the princess's safety is being talked about with someone else. He tells himself it isn't necessary, because as long as he's there, no harm can come to her. Feeling like it's a waste of time, he decides to turn around and head back to the room. When he gets to the door, he realizes something is wrong. The guards are gone. He senses movement inside and quickly rushes forward, kicking the door open. As the door swings open, his eyes immediately land on someone lying on the floor in a pool of blood. It's Dora, clutching her throat, crying out that she doesn't want to die. Nearby, a knight stands with a knife pointed at the bed where the princess is lying. The knight looks at Dora and dismisses her coldly, saying she's not the one. He then turns his attention to the princess, raising the knife to strike. Before he can do anything, Arligalak rushes forward and grabs the knight, demanding to know if he wants to die. The princess suddenly wakes up to find a knife pointed straight at her face. Her eyes go wide in fear as she realizes the danger. But before anything can happen, the man behind the attacker moves quickly. He strikes the knight, knocking him out cold. The princess's heart races as she sees the fallen knight. It's clear now that they are there to harm her. Another knight in the room shouts a command to attack everyone. The princess doesn't waste time, thinking quickly. She knows they can't just wait around to be hurt. Grabbing the candle stand next to her bed, she warns the man about the danger, but he tells her to focus on protecting herself. Without hesitation, he charges at the enemies, taking them down one by one. One of the attackers gets close to her, but just as he's about to strike, the man grabs him and stops him in his tracks. He's determined and tells the attacker that he won't let harm get anywhere near her. After the immediate danger is over, he turns to the princess and asks if she's all right. She breathes a sigh of relief and says she's fine, thanking him for saving her. She notices his hand is hurt and offers to help. He lets her hold it, but insists it's not serious, and that she shouldn't worry about it. Taking her hand gently, he leads her in another direction, explaining that the place isn't safe anymore and they need to leave. She resists, pulling her hand away. She says she can't just leave like that. She thinks about her decisions and admits that she had been too naive. All she wanted was to clear her name and go home, but she hadn't realized how her actions could hurt others. She can't bear the thought of more people losing their lives, especially those at the Highland camp. The two of them ride away on the horse, trying to put as much distance as they can between themselves and the danger they've just escaped. After a little while, the princess speaks up, saying they've probably run far enough now. He reassures her, telling her that their pursuers won't be able to catch up, no matter how hard they try. Then, he asks her where they should go next, but she doesn't have an answer. Her face falls, and tears suddenly roll down her cheeks. She leans her head against his chest and says, with a shaky voice, that she feels like she has nothing left and no place to go. He gently wipes the tears away with his finger, holding her face in his hands, not quite understanding how she can feel that way when he's still there with her. Back at the camp, someone reports to the general. They say that all the bodies they found were male, and each had a weapon on them. The only female body they found was the one on the bed, and it had a deep wound. Lady Aisha, who stands behind the general, covers her mouth with both hands as she realizes something. She starts to think about the female body and wonders where Dora might be. The general, holding the princess's tiara in his hands, shakes his head in disbelief at what has happened. The people nearby start whispering to each other. Some of them mention the noblewoman the general had been talking to, saying she must have been burned to death. Others tell them to stop talking, but the murmurs don't quiet down. Lady Aisha can't shake the feeling of unease as she thinks back to when she prepared the princess's body, even taking off her crown. Her thoughts are interrupted when a man approaches the general and offers his condolences. As the murmurs continue around her, she notices someone in the crowd and wonders if the prince is there to investigate. But before she can think more, the crowd keeps talking, mentioning Lady Aisha, and how the child had been too scared to leave home after everything that happened. Meanwhile, the prince walks away, and the buzz of conversation carries on. Elsewhere, in the royal capital palace, a bird flies in with a note. Someone at a salon reads it and smiles, satisfied to hear that the princess has burned to death. With this news, he feels sure that his plans can move forward without any obstacles. In another scene, the two of them stop to rest for a while. He tells her to sit down and calm down, gently touching an injury on her face. She winces in pain and tells him it hurts, but he sees this as a good sign. He reminds her that she's been through worse when they were in the cave, even showing courage by helping him escape from the dragon. He wonders why she seems so discouraged now. They sit together, and she admits that she feels like the road home is blocked. He reassures her, saying if one road is blocked, they will just find another way. She thinks about it for a moment, considering her options. The only place she can think of turning to is the dwarfs of Iron Ridge Mountain. But getting there won't be easy. To reach it, they would have to go through the northern kingdom of Rohan, which is friendly with Marcellus Selen. That route would put them at risk of being exposed. The other option is to go south, around Guman Forest, but that path is filled with fierce trolls, making it nearly impossible for just the two of them to make it through. She sighs, frustrated that neither path seems like a good choice. He looks deep in thought, and when she asks him what he's thinking, he points in a certain direction. She follows where he's pointing and realizes he's suggesting they go through the poison mist swamp. She quickly shakes her head, saying that the swamp is ancient and dangerous, filled with poisonous mist. No one has ever survived there, let alone passed through it. He stands behind her, thinking about what she said, but then he pulls her onto the horse. She protests, asking what he's doing, but he simply puts her on the horse and tells her they're going through the swamp. She can't believe it and asks again, but is firm and determined. As they ride toward the swamp, he tells her he's confident they can find a way through, even with the poison fog surrounding them. The poison mist swamp looms ahead, thick and eerie. He spurs the horse forward, but it stops abruptly, refusing to go any closer. She pleads with him not to push it, saying even if they tried, the horse won't budge. He stares at the swamp, his thoughts drifting. Humans are so fragile, he thinks. How could anyone walk through this massive, deadly place? They both dismount, and he suggests she find something to eat, while he takes the horse to drink. She hesitates, glancing at the swirling mist ahead, her heart uneasy. The swamp feels alive, dangerous. She remembers Archpriest Varensel's warning, that the deeper one goes, the stronger the poisonous miasma becomes. No one has ever made it through. Her purification magic might help, but not for long, not through all of this. She looks back toward him. He told her earlier he had a plan. She wonders what it could be. A moment later, he walks up with a smile, saying the horse is ready now that it's had water. It's calmer, willing to move. Relieved but still uneasy, she follows him as they mount and start into the swamp. The mist surrounds them immediately, thick and twisting, curling like ghostly fingers. The air feels heavy, making it harder to breathe. She keeps her eyes fixed ahead, scanning for any movement, any sign of danger. The horse moves steadily, its steps careful but firm, as if sensing the danger around them too. Time passes slowly, the world around them a suffocating gray. The mist clings to their clothes and skin, its coldness sinking into their bones. She notices something odd after a while. The mist ahead looks lighter, almost thinner. It feels less oppressive, like the power behind it is fading. She turns to him, her voice low but steady, pointing out that the mist doesn't seem as strong anymore. He glances ahead, his expression calm but focused. He doesn't say anything, just nods, his sharp gaze scanning the swamp like he's waiting for something. His nose picks up a faint, earthy scent, something wild and alive. He glances toward a nearby tree and spots a small creature perched on a branch, its fur almost blending into the fog. A strange thought crosses his mind. He wonders how it might taste if he caught it. The idea makes him smirk slightly, and he accidentally says it out loud in a low, thoughtful voice, not really meaning to. She hears him and looks over, asking what he just said. He blinks, caught off guard, and quickly hides his amusement behind a calm smile, telling her it's nothing important and they should keep moving. As they ride, he casually mentions again that he has a way to handle the poisonous mist, reassuring her that they'll be fine. His voice is steady, but his attention lingers on the creature as it disappears into the fog behind them. Without saying much else, they press on, the mist growing lighter, but still wrapping around them like a restless shadow. They keep going until the sky starts to dim, the gray of the mist blending with the darkness creeping in. He notices that the small creature from earlier is still following them, darting between the trees and staying close. They decide to stop and rest at a spot that seems safe enough. She gets down from the horse and stretches, her body tired but her mind unsettled. She tells him something feels off. He glances at her and asks what she means. She explains that the toxic mist here felt really thick when they first arrived, so she added a few purification barriers just to be safe. But now she realizes her body doesn't seem to be affected at all, which doesn't make sense. The only discomfort she feels is a strange heat on her back that won't go away. She moves closer to him, reaching out and gripping his arm. Her voice is firm, but curious, as she reminds him he said earlier he had a way to deal with the poisonous mist. She looks at him closely and asks if he already knew the mist wasn't as harmful as people say, or if he's been here before. She urges him to explain, her tone insistent but not accusing. He stays quiet for a moment, his mind turning over what to say. She presses again, this time asking if he can teach her how he's avoiding the effects. He hesitates, his thoughts wandering to something only he knows. Dragons aren't affected by the poisonous mist, not the way humans are. And she carries his mark now, even if she doesn't realize it yet. That's why the mist doesn't harm her. He wonders how much to tell her, his gaze thoughtful as she watches him, waiting for an answer he isn't ready to give. He isn't sure how to explain everything to her, so he stays quiet, thinking of a way to make it all make sense. Before he can say anything, the creature from earlier suddenly appears in front of them, but it's much bigger than it looked before. It's ready to attack, its snake-like body coiled and its sharp fangs glinting in the dim light. He steps in front of her without hesitation, his body tense and ready to fight. He tells her to hide in the cave nearby, his voice firm and leaving no room for argument. She hesitates, but then rushes to safety as he holds his ground. The creature lunges at him, its fangs aim straight for his chest, but he catches its two long teeth with his bare hands, holding it back with surprising strength. They struggle, the creature twisting and hissing, but he doesn't let go. For a moment, it looks like he's winning, his grip unshakable as he forces it down. She watches from her hiding spot, her heart pounding. She shouts that she's ready to heal him if he gets hurt, her voice echoing in the cave. He glances her way and shouts back that he doesn't need healing yet, his tone steady and confident. The fight grows more intense, but he keeps the upper hand, pushing the creature back little by little. Finally, with a sharp crack, he breaks one of its teeth clean off and uses it to stab the creature. It writhes in pain, thrashing wildly, but he doesn't stop until it collapses. She keeps calling out from the cave, warning him to be careful, her voice filled with worry. He reassures her, saying it's almost over, his focus never wavering. As she starts casting a protective spell to shield him, another part of the creature's body slithers toward her. It's faster than she expected, and before she can react, it lunges at her. She screams his name, her voice high and panicked. He moves instantly, leaving the first creature behind as he rushes to her. With one clean strike, he pierces the attacking part of the creature, its dark blood splattering onto the ground. He grimaces at the smell, muttering that it's worse than he imagined and wondering aloud if the creature would even taste good if cooked. His casual comment catches her off guard, but before she can say anything, he reaches out and picks her up, holding her steady. He tells her it's okay now, his voice calm as he checks her over. He asks if she can still keep going, his eyes searching hers for any sign of injury. She nods quickly, saying she's fine and that she can keep working. He glances back at the fallen creature and admits he underestimated it, then asks again if she's hurt. She shakes her head and tells him she's okay, adding that is incredible. She calls him the best warrior she's ever seen, her admiration shining through her words. He smiles at that, his expression softening. He tells her she hasn't even seen his full strength yet, his tone light but confident. Her chest feels warm at his words, and she can't help but think how much she admires his strength and calmness. Meanwhile, the horse lays down nearby, seemingly unbothered by everything that just happened, its ears flicking lazily as if it's enjoying the break. She glances at it and then back at him, feeling a strange sense of calm despite the chaos. They both take a moment to breathe before he motions for them to move on. The night is cold, so they make a fire to keep warm and decide to camp there. The warmth from the flames feels comforting after the long, tense day. He sits close to the fire and notices a mushroom growing nearby. Without saying anything, he plucks it from the ground. She watches him, curious, and asks what he's doing. Her voice carries doubt as she asks if it's safe to eat something like that. He doesn't answer right away, focusing on what he's doing. He wonders briefly if this is how humans normally prepare their food. Finally, he tells her to hold on for a minute and promises her it'll be fine. She agrees to wait, but watches him closely, her uncertainty clear. He sharpens a stick and spears the mushroom, then holds it over the fire to roast it. The smell starts to drift through the air as it cooks, earthy and warm. He tells her it's going to be tasty, but she looks at him skeptically, not entirely convinced. After some time, he pulls it away from the flames, the mushroom now golden and steaming. He breaks off a piece and offers it to her, his expression calm and encouraging. She hesitates for a moment, then thanks him and takes it. She holds it in her hand, staring at it. Archpriest Verenzel's warning about wild mushrooms flashes in her mind. They aren't supposed to be safe to eat. He smiles at her and tells her it smells delicious, trying to reassure her. She glances at him, her doubts starting to fade as she sees he's already eaten some and seems fine. Maybe he's right, she thinks. Slowly, she brings it to her lips, takes a small bite, and begins to chew. The flavor surprises her, it's rich and savory. But before she can say anything, her body starts to feel heavy. Her vision blurs, and she collapses to the ground. He's on his feet instantly, rushing to her side, calling her name over and over. His voice is urgent, filled with worry. He kneels beside her, shaking her gently, telling her to wake up. She doesn't respond, her body limp in his arms. Panic grips him as he tries to figure out what went wrong. His mark should protect her from the poison mist, so it can't be that. His mind races, and his eyes land on the half-eaten mushroom. Could it be the mushroom? Without thinking, he picks it up and walks over to the horse, urging it to take a bite. The horse sniffs it, then eats it willingly. He watches it closely, waiting to see if anything happens, but the horse seems fine. He frowns, thinking to himself that if things get worse, he might have to eat the horse someday after all. He hurries back to her, still unconscious on the ground. Gently, he tilts her head and presses a finger into her mouth, trying to get her to spit out anything that might still be there. For a moment, nothing happens, and his worry deepens. Then her eyelids flutter weakly, and she takes a small, shaky breath. Her eyes open just a little, and she looks up at him. Relief floods his face as he exhales a breath he didn't realize he was holding. She's alive. Carefully, he adjusts her position so she's sitting up a bit, resting her head against his chest. His arms wrap around her securely, holding her close to him as her breathing evens out. He doesn't let go, his grip firm yet gentle, as if afraid she might slip away again. He doesn't say anything, just stays there, feeling her warmth against him and silently promising himself he won't let this happen again. He softly asks how she feels, his voice filled with worry as he holds her close. He tells her she collapsed after eating the mushroom, and he was afraid something terrible had happened to her. Her fingers twitch slightly, and she slowly raises her hands toward the sky. At first, he's confused and just watches, trying to figure out what she's doing. His brows draw together as he gently asks her if something is wrong, but she doesn't seem to hear him. Her lips move faintly, and she starts mumbling words he can't make out. She keeps reaching toward the sky, her voice so soft it's almost swallowed by the quiet night, asking someone to wait for her. His chest tightens as he stares at her, unsure of what's happening. His mind fills with uneasy thoughts. Is she calling out to someone from a memory? Is this some kind of dream, or is she caught in the space between life and death? He leans closer, trying to catch her words, hoping for some clue to what's going on. Her breathing is steady now, but she still seems trapped in whatever vision is holding her. Then she mumbles a name, Ansel. Her voice is filled with desperation, as she pleads with Ansel not to leave her, not to run away so fast. The sound of her voice, so soft yet urgent, sends a strange chill through him. Who is Ansel? Why does she sound so desperate to reach him? He keeps holding her, his arms tight around her as if that alone can anchor her back to reality. She stretches her hands forward again, as if trying to grab someone only she can see. Her fingers close on empty air, but her face softens into an expression of peace. He stares, completely shaken, unable to look away from the scene in front of him. The forest around them stays eerily silent, the tension so thick it feels like it could snap at any moment. He doesn't move, doesn't even breathe for a second, just watching her closely. His mind races, trying to make sense of what he just witnessed. Who is Ansel? Is it someone from her past? What kind of dream or vision has her so consumed? Finally, she starts to relax in his arms, her breathing slowing and becoming steady. The strange energy that had surrounded her fades away, leaving her limp but calm against him. He doesn't let go, holding her as if afraid she might disappear if he loosens his grip. Questions fill his mind, swirling endlessly, but for now, he pushes them aside. She's alive. That's the only thing that matters right now. He keeps holding her, his eyes scanning her face for any sign that she might wake up fully. The warmth of the fire flickers nearby, casting shadows across the ground, but he barely notices. All he can think about is her, the name she called out, and the strange vision she seemed to have. In the vision, she stands in a beautiful garden, holding Ansel's hands tightly. He looks at her with a soft smile and tells her that once she ascends the throne, they'll get married. Her face lights up with happiness as she reaches for his face, her voice full of warmth, as she says they'll always be together. But in the physical world, she's holding the male lead's face, her hands gripping him like she's still lost in her dream. He doesn't like it, but decides to endure it for now. He stays silent, watching her closely, his eyes narrowing. She calls out to him, her voice tinged with confusion, asking why he isn't saying anything. She wonders if he's refusing to promise her something. Her confusion slowly turns to anger as she glares at him, accusing him of being a coward. Her voice rises, frustration spilling out as she asks if it's because he doesn't believe she'll ever ascend the throne. She calls him scared and weak, saying he doesn't dare to stand by her. Her words strike him like a challenge, and finally, he speaks. His voice is calm but firm as he tells her to stop. He grabs her face, tilting it slightly so she's forced to look at him. His eyes burn with intensity, as he tells her it seems like she's forgotten something important. He reminds her that she is his sacrificial bride, and that they are already married. His words are steady, leaving no room for doubt, and he adds that she belongs to him completely. He leans closer, and before she can react, he kisses her. His grip on her face is firm, but not harsh, and the kiss is deep, claiming, filled with a sense of finality that leaves no room for argument. Her eyes flutter open as full consciousness returns. Realizing what's happening, she jerks back and tries to push him away, her voice sharp as she tells him to stop. He refuses, grabbing her wrists and holding her hands down firmly to stop her resistance. His tone softens as he calls her his little bride, telling her not to move. His lips press against hers again, more insistent this time, his voice a low murmur as he tells her she's his. But then something shifts. His body tenses, and he pulls back suddenly, his breathing heavy. His hand moves to his chest as if trying to steady himself, and a strange heat spreads through him. His body feels wrong, like it's on fire from the inside out. He doesn't understand what's happening. He's transformed many times before, but this is different, uncontrollable. A wild thought crosses his mind. Has he been poisoned too? He shakes his head, refusing to believe it, but the burning doesn't stop. It grows stronger, consuming him. His eyes darken as the urge in him intensifies, and his focus sharpens entirely on her. His grip tightens, his body leaning closer as if driven by instinct. She struggles against him, her body twisting as she pushes with all her strength, trying to get away. Her voice trembles as she calls his name, but he barely hears it over the chaos inside him. He fights to stay in control, but every second that passes makes it harder. He doesn't want to hurt her, but the fire inside him is relentless, pulling him further into a state he can't explain. He feels her resistance and lets her go, stepping back to give her space. He calls her name softly, his voice calm, but full of concern. Rubbing his arm where she bit him, he gives a faint smile and tells her she bit him hard. His tone is light, almost teasing, as if trying to ease the tension. She stays quiet, just watching him, her breathing still unsteady. After a moment, he asks if she's still in pain, his gaze scanning her carefully. She says she doesn't feel bad anymore, but her hands and feet still hurt. She flexes her fingers slowly and winces, shifting uncomfortably as she moves her legs. His chest tightens with guilt as he watches her struggle. The memory of her biting him flashes in his mind, and he wonders what she must have been feeling in that moment. Then he remembers something important: poison doesn't work on dragons. He wonders if his blood might have neutralized whatever was affecting her. They move on, the air between them quiet, but heavy with unspoken thoughts. He keeps glancing her way, checking to see if she's really okay. He asks again, and she nods, saying she's fine, though her voice is a little softer than usual. He urges her to pick up the pace, saying they should move quickly, and she agrees without much argument. As they walk, she keeps turning to look at him. He catches her staring and raises a brow, asking why she keeps looking at him like that. She hesitates, then touches his face lightly before pulling her hand back. He smirks and asks if she wants another kiss, or maybe just wants to bite him again. She quickly tells him to stop talking, her tone sharp, though her face turns slightly red. They reach a spot where the air feels strange, and she suddenly slows down, frowning. She asks if he notices anything odd. He pauses, sniffing the air carefully, then tells her there's a strong stench growing around them. She agrees but adds that it's more than just the smell, it feels like something isn't right. He glances around, his senses on high alert, and nods. He mentions how eerily quiet it is, how even the usual background sounds of the forest are gone, leaving only their voices echoing in the stillness. Before either of them can say more, a pair of glowing eyes appears behind them in the darkness. They freeze, both of them instantly on guard. The creature doesn't move, but its stare is fixed on them, unblinking and full of menace. He steps in front of her, his hand slowly moving to his weapon as he whispers for her to stay close. The air feels tense, and they stay alert, watching their surroundings. Suddenly, 4 creatures burst from the shadows, rushing toward them. He quickly tells her to retreat and get on the horse. They both jump onto the horse and urge it to run fast, but one of the creatures is gaining on them. She points it out, and they both turn to see the creature jumping toward them. She casts a spell just in time to stop it, but the horse slows down, unable to run any further with the creatures closing in. They are surrounded, the creatures growling and getting closer. He knows that if there were only one or two, he could handle them easily, but now, with so many, he needs a new plan. She cuts into his thoughts, asking what they should do. He tells her not to worry, reassuring her that he won't let anything happen to her. Then, an idea comes to him. He tells her they should switch places, that she should take control of the horse. Without waiting for her response, he gets down and gently pushes her forward. She looks at him, confused, asking what he's doing, but he doesn't answer. Instead, he speaks to the horse, telling it to run. The horse starts moving, and she asks where it's going. One of the creatures steps forward, ready to strike. He takes his stance, telling the creature to prepare to die. He tries to change into his original form, but he realizes he can't. They begin to fight, struggling against each other. He's holding his own, but the creature manages to injure him slightly, and his anger flares up. Meanwhile, she's worried about him. She grabs the reins of the horse, deciding to go back. She tells herself that she's the crown princess of a kingdom, not someone who runs away from a fight. She returns to where he is, surprising him. He asks why she came back, and she says she's here to treat his wound. She uses her healing magic to mend his injury, and is pleased to see she knows enhancement magic. He suggests they fight together now, side by side, and she agrees, ready to take on the creatures. The horse stands by, ready for action. He asks if she remembers that he can make small flames, and she nods, saying she remembers. They both get ready to fight, standing firm. As the creatures start to move closer, the male lead sends fire from his hands and calls for her to use her enhancement magic to make the fire stronger. She does, and the fire hits the creatures, pushing them back. They do it again, buying themselves a bit more time. Quickly, they get on the horse and ride away, hoping to escape. As they go further, they notice the poisonous mist getting thicker, knowing they're heading toward the center of the swamp. Suddenly, our girl starts coughing and has trouble breathing. He's worried and asks her what's wrong, if she's feeling sick. From behind, the creature's roar gets louder. He's frustrated that the creatures won't give up, calling them persistent ghosts. He pulls on the reins, urging the horse to go faster. They can't stop now, not with the creatures still on their tail. He's worried for her, and in his panic, he bites his finger so hard it starts to bleed. He presses his blood to her lips, hoping it will help. After a while, she stirs, pushing him away and asking what he's doing, saying it feels strange. He's relieved, happy his blood worked as he hoped. Meanwhile, the horse is exhausted, and she can hardly breathe either. She starts to wonder if anyone cares if she lives or dies. The creature's roar gets louder, and she tells him they're still chasing them. He pulls the reins harder, making the horse go faster. They can't stop yet, and he tells her to hang in there just a little longer. They keep moving without stopping until they reach the edge of the lake. The horse walks slowly, clearly exhausted. They notice that the area looks different, and he tells her this is the center of the poison mist swamp. She looks around, feeling uneasy, and says the place seems kind of scary. He smirks, saying that since the monsters didn't follow them, there must be something worse than them in the lake. She spots a path leading toward the center of the lake and wonders if they should go take a look. Suddenly, the horse collapses on the ground. She asks what's wrong with it, and as she examines the horse, she realizes it's barely alive. One more step would kill it. The male lead suggests they should walk the rest of the way, but she says the place still feels scary. He reassures her, saying he's there with her and that since they've come this far, they should take a look. She agrees. The horse, not wanting to move any further, pretends to be dead. As they walk closer, he can feel a strange, ancient power coming from the island in the center of the lake. Although she doesn't know it yet, he is still stuck in his human form and wants to return to his true self. He might need some powerful force to help him. They continue, holding hands. As they get closer, something starts to rise from the lake. It's a huge tree, and they both take a step back, feeling scared. The male lead watches it closely. The tree looks unusual, and he can sense an ancient power from it. Whatever it is, he doesn't think it has much life left in it yet. She moves closer to the tree and gently touches it. He quickly asks her what she's doing and tells her to be careful. She replies that the tree is in pain, and that she can hear it crying. Looking up, she notices the thorns on it and says they are causing it a lot of pain. The tree continues to groan. She asks him if they should help pull out the thorns. He's surprised by her words and asks why, reminding her that she said this place was scary. He wonders if she isn't worried about something strange happening. She tells him that when she was younger, her teacher told her that the Poison Mist Swamp was an ancient and corrupted land where no one had ever survived crossing it. She adds that if she had a choice, she wouldn't be here either, but since they are still alive, maybe they have a chance. She takes his hand and tries to convince him. She says that maybe no one has ever reached the center of the swamp, but they did, and they heard the trees lament. So no matter how scary it is, it doesn't matter anymore. He takes a deep breath, holds her face, and tells her that since she isn't afraid, neither is he. He tells her to step back, then leaps high and removes a thorn that's piercing the tree. As he does, a strange liquid starts to leak from the hole. She cries out to him, warning that the slime is poisonous, and that he should be careful. She quickly casts a penetration shield to stop the liquid from entering his body. He lands on the ground, and she asks if he's okay, starting to move closer. He stops her and tells her to stay back. He says she should stay further away. She agrees. Suddenly, the fog grows thicker, and the horse feels like it might collapse. The other thorns start falling off the tree by themselves. She walks up to him and asks if he's hurt anywhere. He tells her not to worry, saying there's just one thorn left. She notices that the tree's wailing has slowed down and tells him. He asks what's so special about that, and she says she feels like the tree is coming back to life. She tells him to hurry and pull out the last thorn. He leaps and removes it, and the fog gets even thicker. She wonders why it's happening and tells him she can't see him anymore. He calls for her to grab his hand. Just in front of them, the tree begins to move. She points it out, and they both watch in silence, unsure of what to do next. The tree suddenly stands up with legs and arms like a person, floating above them. They stare in shock. The male lead wonders why the tree is so excited. Our girl comments that the tree really did come back to life. She notices it isn't crying anymore and even has a small flower growing on it. The tree speaks in a language they don't understand. It asks if they really set it free. She tells him that they don't understand what the tree is saying. She suddenly realizes that she's talking to a tree and wonders if she's still hallucinating from the poisonous mushrooms. The male lead tells the tree to speak in a human language, asking it to say something they can understand. The tree mutters something again, and he asks if it can understand human language. He also asks why the fog is getting thicker. Finally, the tree starts speaking the human language. It says it's been so long that it can barely remember the words. It tells them that it's lying about being human. Our girl is surprised that it can speak their language and asks if it's a tree or something else. The tree replies that it's a treant, to be precise. It adds that it can barely remember anything since it's been so long. Then, the tree stops and looks worried. Suddenly, it picks both of them up with its hands. The male lead asks what the tree is doing, trying to get free. The tree lifts them high into the air. Our girl comments that it's so tall. The male lead shouts at the tree to let go and not hurt her. The tree tells him to calm down. He doesn't budge and says that he's done for. Just then, a force hits the tree. The tree directs their attention to the lake where the fog is clearing. A creature starts to come out of the lake. They both wonder what it is. The tree tells them that it's an old friend, and that it didn't expect it to still be around after all this time. It looks at the creature and calls it evil, trying to remember its name. Our girl tells the tree to forget the name and focus on how to get them out of there. The lake water begins to flood the island, and our girl notices that the tree's roots are corroded. The water is full of venom. She tells the tree that she'll treat it. The tree thanks her and tells her not to waste her energy, saying that she already helped by pulling out the poison thorns. It keeps them both on a high branch and tells them to hold on tight. The tree begins to shed its old skin and calls out to the creature. Meanwhile, up on the branch, our girl tells the male lead that she's scared. He reassures her, telling her not to be afraid because he's with her. One of the creature's tails swings forward, ready to attack the tree. Our girl warns the tree to watch out. The battle begins. The tree uses his hand to pierce the monster's tail, and venom starts dripping out. Our girl notices that the venom is eating away at his hand and offers to treat him. The tree screams that he's fine. The tail begins to pull back slowly. The tree comments that the creature is still disgusting. Meanwhile, our girl tells the male lead that she thinks the tree is struggling. She wonders if they can really defeat such a terrifying monster. He replies that they haven't even seen the monster's head yet, and that the tree might still have some tricks left. The tree interrupts them, saying the male lead has good taste. He then tells them that the monster's head is pinned under the island by his roots. They are both surprised. The tree continues, explaining that this happened a long time ago. They couldn't kill each other, and he didn't expect it to take so long. He calls the male lead, Little Dragon Guy, and asks if he's impressed by what he just heard. The male lead tells him to stop talking and focus on taking down the monster first. Our girl is surprised by the name, Little Dragon Guy. The tails return to attack again. The male lead tells the tree not to get distracted and to stay focused. The tree tries to defend against the attack, replying that when you get older, it's rare to have someone to talk to. The tail splashes lake water, and it starts heading toward our girl. The tree warns them to be careful, because the lake water is poisonous. The male lead quickly casts his dark magic shield to block the water from touching them. Our girl makes a sound, and he asks her what's wrong. She says she feels sick. He gets upset, feeling that his magic is harming her. He's burning with anger, thinking that if he could fly, he would burn the monster with one breath of fire. As if he read his mind, the tree tells him that even fire wouldn't be enough to kill the monster. The male lead, angry at the tree for reading his thoughts, snaps at it. The tree then warns our girl that it's dangerous outside. It starts to open up, and the humans are startled, asking what it's doing. It fully opens up and gently drops her into a tree hollow, telling her she will be safe there. She feels afraid, but the male lead reassures her, telling her not to worry and that he will stay with her. Just as he's about to enter the hollow with her, the tree closes it and tells him to stay outside to help. The male lead isn't amused and tells the tree that since our girl helped him, he needs to return the favor. He warns the tree that if it doesn't protect her, even trapped in human form, he will still take it down. The tree comments that dragons are as hot-tempered as ever. As the monster returns, they prepare for battle. The tree asks the male lead who the Black Dragon King is now, adding that it can't be him, or the Black Dragon clan would be doomed. The male lead, now irritated, tells the tree to stop talking and that it's asking for trouble. He releases a powerful magic on the monster, causing it to stop for a moment. Thanks to the mark the tree left on our girl, he knows she's safe inside. Meanwhile, inside the hollow, our girl notices a shiny seed and wonders what it is. Outside, the tree tells the male lead to stop daydreaming and help deal with the monster. The male lead asks the tree what he wants him to help with. The tree reminds him of when he said he could burn the monster with one breath of fire. The male lead replies that he can't do that with his current power. The tree tells him that he can transfer the rest of his power to him, and that he should light the fire. The male lead is surprised, and the tree explains that he should use him as the torch. They continue fighting and talking. The male lead asks if the tree really wants him to burn it with fire, and the tree says he doesn't have much time left. The land has been corrupted for too long, and it's time to purify it and return it to its original state. As the last demigod, the tree wants to take the old poison with him and die together with it. On the ground, the tree starts to lose its grip, and the monster's head begins to free itself. The male lead agrees right away, saying that he needs power right now. The tree is surprised by his response. He thinks to himself that meeting a greedy dragon isn't necessarily a bad thing, and he remembers there's also a soft-hearted girl. Inside the hollow, the shiny seed starts shaking so much that it hits our girl's head. She winces in pain and wonders what's happening outside to make the seed shake so much. She notices that the seed's color is changing and that it's getting hot. She feels like the tree is in a lot of pain, and she wonders if there's anything she can do to help. Outside, the tree is transferring his power to the male lead. During the transfer, the tree explains that the power will temporarily restore his original dragon form, and then he'll know what to do next. The transfer is finished, and the male lead begins to transform. The male lead tells the tree that since it's his wish, he will fulfill it. He starts flying into the air. One of the monster's tails grabs him, but he shakes it off. Now, he's fully a dragon. The tree is struggling to hold on to the monster and urges the dragon to hurry, saying he can't control it anymore. The monster begins to break out of the island. The dragon charges down and reminds the tree to protect our girl. The dragon breathes fire on the tree. The tree holds the monster, trying to make sure they both perish together. The monster struggles, telling the tree to let go, but the tree refuses, saying it's all over. Inside the hollow, our girl is trying to heal the tree. She sees that his life is slipping away, but she doesn't want to give up. Suddenly, the shiny seed explodes. She opens her eyes and finds herself in a green pasture. Looking around, she wonders where she is. Then, a tree greets her. She feels like it's the tree elder, but this time, he looks more green and full of leaves. The tree welcomes her to the demigod tree's territory, and tells her that from now on, this will be her territory. She can't believe what she's hearing. She's surprised by how beautiful the demigod's territory is and asks if it's the former poison mist swamp. The tree is not happy with how she calls the place. He explains that it was once called the Moonlight Forest, but is now known as the Poison Mist Swamp. He tells her that a long time ago, he and his kin couldn't completely eliminate the poisonous bugs invading the forest. He says that in the old days, he fought the old poison until both of them were on their last breath. But thanks to her, it has finally been dealt with. He thanks her again, calling her the soft-hearted girl, and saying he owes the victory to her. It was her final effort that stopped the old toxic beast from escaping. He says that now he can finally return to the dust. She's shocked by what he says and feels like something doesn't feel right. She asks him what he means by returning to the dust. She reaches out and touches him, but she can't feel any life from him anymore. She asks what's happening, but before she can get an answer, he slowly begins to fall apart until he finally explodes. She calls out to him, but it's too late, he's already gone. The male lead appears and wraps her in a tight hug. She cries hard, telling him that the poisonous bug is dead, but the tree has also disappeared. He wipes her tears away, telling her everything will be okay now and that she shouldn't cry anymore. Then, he notices something on her head and asks what it is. She touches it, and he asks if she has a new crown. She remembers the moment when the tree gave it to her. The tree had told her that he overheard she was a princess of an exiled human kingdom. He asked what kind of princess doesn't have a crown, and then he placed it on her head, blessing her as he did. Back in the present, she starts crying again in his arms. She tells him that the tree used his last strength to protect the land, but now she has nothing left. She wonders if she'll be able to rebuild everything. He comforts her, though he isn't feeling very happy himself. The old tree could only temporarily restore his form, and he still needs more power to move forward. Suddenly, the ground starts shaking, and he wonders what's going on. He quickly picks her up and starts running as the ground continues to break apart. He tells her to hold on tightly, because he's about to make a big leap. He jumps and lands on the other side. Rain starts falling, and he says they've landed in an underground spring. She feels embarrassed, and before she can react, he kisses her. Meanwhile, the horse looks away, not wanting to see what's happening. They look at the spring in front of them, noticing how pure and clear the water has become. She smiles, saying that the poison mist swamp is starting to clean up. She feels happy about that. The rain continues to fall gently. He suggests they walk around and find a place to dry her clothes. They start walking, leaving the horse behind. The horse watches them, feeling abandoned and useless. It follows them slowly. After walking for a while, it starts getting late, and he sets up a fire in a spot he picks. He lays a stick across the fire and tells her to take off her clothes to dry them. He does the same, removing his own shirt and laying it on the stick. She notices something shiny on the ground and picks it up. He asks her what it is. She's not sure, but it looks like the seed that protected her earlier. He smiles, liking how shiny it is. She notices his expression and asks if he likes shiny things. Quickly, she walks over to the horse and cuts a small piece of the reins. She threads the shiny object onto the leather strips and brings it to him. He looks surprised, not sure what she's planning. She tells him to bend his head down, so she can put it around his neck. She says it looks good on him and adds that she will find a shiny necklace for him later. She continues, telling him that the tree gave her a forest crown, so the object is his gift. She blesses him the same way the tree had blessed her. He looks at her with eyes full of gratitude and leans in to kiss her. After a few moments, she calls his name. He asks her what's wrong, and she raises her concern about her clothes. He asks her how she plans to heal if she doesn't take off her clothes. She tells him that if he gets sick again, she won't help him. He doesn't listen and takes off her clothes for her, leaving her in just her gown. He hangs her clothes to dry on the stick and they continue being close with each other. She suddenly tells him to wait. Her hand reaches for the shiny object and presses it. Immediately, it has an effect on him, and he begins to scream in pain. They are both shocked by this. Something hits him from behind, it's a stick. The stick keeps hitting him again and again. The horse watches this, clearly amused, and starts laughing. She laughs too. He asks her what's so funny, clearly not amused by the situation. It turns out that her forest crown had grown branches that were now hitting him. The crown speaks, telling him not to bully her. He's annoyed, but she just laughs harder, finding the whole thing funny. He picks up the crown and decides to use his fire to burn the branches off and return it to its original state. Once he's done, he hands the crown back to her. She's still surprised and asks how the crown was able to lash out at him. He tells her that the tree tribe's things are just weird. He adds that she shouldn't wear the crown anymore, and promises to get her a big gemstone crown that will sparkle for her. He smiles, thinking about how there are many beautiful gems on the Dragon Island. She agrees with him. They lie back down together, and he starts mumbling, saying he's not bullying her. His thoughts drift back to a few hours ago. After he had taken care of the poisonous bug, the tree was left looking burnt and lifeless. The male lead asks where she is. The tree carefully brings her out of the hollow and says, calling the male lead a giant dragon, "Why are you so attached to a human girl?" The male lead explains that she was driven out of her home, so he felt sorry for her and decided to stay by her side. The tree warns him that she's carrying a lot of sadness in her heart, so he shouldn't hurt her. He tells the tree it's none of its business. When she comes out of the hollow, he hugs her and starts walking away with her. The tree calls out, warning him not to be arrogant, saying that while it can't control him, there will be others who can. The tree warns him that a stronger force would one day restrain him. Back to the present, the night has passed, and their fire has burned out. The next morning, they get dressed and start to move. They look at the spring in front of them, and it looks much fresher now. The toxic mist is gone, and everything feels more comfortable. They can see the remains of the old tree in the center of the lake. The male lead tells her it's time to go since the poison mist is no longer a threat. They get on the horse, and he asks if they should head north to find the dwarfs. She agrees, saying they should go to the dwarfs of the Iron Ridge Mountain. He pulls the reins, and they start moving quickly. As they ride, he notices something. She comments that while the center of the swamp is already starting to get better, it will take time for the whole land to recover. He looks at her, thinking. But now, even without needing his mark, she isn't afraid of the toxic mist anymore. The tree crown on her head starts to release energy, helping to clear the way for them. After traveling for a while, they finally make it out of the swamp. Just below the mountain, they spot a lot of refugees walking. She wonders why so many are fleeing. She looks at them for a bit and says it doesn't feel right. He asks her what's bothering her. She points out that they've been heading north, but the refugees are heading south, and there are so many of them. He asks her what refugees are. She's surprised he doesn't know what they are and wonders what kind of sheltered prince he is. She decides to go ask one of them what's going on. He protests, but he can't stop her. He still doesn't understand what refugees are exactly. She walks over to one of the refugees. Luckily, she had traveled a lot with her teacher, so she knows how to approach them. She greets an old man and asks him if he knows the way to Iron Bridge Mountain in the north. The old man is surprised by her question. He asks her if she really wants to go north at this time. She asks him to explain. The little girl standing next to the old man says the north is very dangerous, that there are huge monsters that eat people. She's shocked by what she hears. She asks if the monsters are different from humans. Meanwhile, the male lead, who is standing behind her, thinks about what he just heard. He used to fly around human lands sometimes, and had never seen any man-eating monsters. He doesn't eat people either. The horse, sensing the situation, starts to think that the monster they are talking about could be the male lead. The old man tells her she can believe him or not, but he advises her to run for her life. He stands up and begins to leave with the little girl. Our girl looks worried. The male lead notices and asks her what's wrong, wondering if the situation seems strange to her. She thinks for a moment and replies that unless there's a war between two kingdoms, it's rare to see such a large-scale migration of refugees. She turns to him and says that if what the old man said is true, and there are man-eating monsters in the north, they might face some danger if they continue. He smiles and tells her that he's actually looking forward to it. She's surprised by his response. He says that he has never seen a man-eating monster before, so they should go. The horse doesn't seem to like this idea at all. They keep traveling, moving further along the road. After a while, they see a small town and decide to take a break. As they get closer, they realize the town is empty and desolate. They wonder what happened to make it so quiet. They walk around and eventually find a tavern. It looks lively, with people inside. They decide to check it out and enter the hall, where they see men sitting and drinking. Our girl feels nervous, wondering what's going on. The bartender greets them and offers a drink. The male lead walks over to take it. She warns him to be careful, thinking there might be a trick. He drinks it down quickly. The bartender seems impressed. Our girl watches him and wonders if he ever thinks to be cautious. She asks the bartender for a room for the night. He agrees and leads them to a room. He calls them honored guests and mentions that she looks tired. He says the tavern has hot water for a shower, but adds that he's short on staff and can't carry the water himself. The male lead considers helping her with that. Meanwhile, our girl notices there's only one bed in the room. The male lead tells her he'll go get the hot water and asks her to stay in the room. She agrees. She sits on the bed, feeling a bit tired. She starts thinking about how they'll soon be in Iron Ridge Mountain. There's a knock on the door. She answers, expecting the male lead. To her surprise, a young lady is standing there. The woman is panicked and begs our girl for help. Our girl asks her what's wrong. Through her sobs, the woman says she needs help with her child, who is very sick. She says only men are around, and no one will help her. She tells her she really doesn't know what else to do, crying as she speaks. Our girl feels bad for the woman, but tells her she can't leave the room. She explains that she promised a friend she would wait for him here. The woman begs her over and over, asking for help. Our girl reassures her that she knows a bit about treatment, and if it's really urgent, the woman can bring the child to her, and she will take a look at him. The woman insists that it's not possible, that the child is too sick and she can't move him. She cries, saying no one will help them. Our girl watches her, unsure what to do. She thinks back to the times she went with her teacher to visit villages, remembering how he always warned her not to trust strangers, but now she's in a tough spot. After a moment, she asks the woman where her room is, saying she will come with her friend to help check on the child. She decides it's best to wait for the male lead to come back. She tells the woman that her friend went to get hot water and will return soon. The woman gives her a room number and says she'll wait for her there. Our girl locks the door behind her and breathes a sigh of relief. She wonders why there are so many refugees heading north. It seems like a long journey, and she figures that getting sick would be normal. She thinks about herself, realizing that if it weren't for the male lead, she might be just like those refugees, lost and not knowing where to go. As she's thinking, there's a knock at the door. She rushes to open it, thinking it's the male lead. In her excitement, she doesn't look up in time. A man is standing there, holding a staff. He hits her with the staff, and everything goes dark. The woman from earlier catches her as she falls, and the man says they should have done this sooner. The woman calls our girl delicate, and says she didn't want to treat her roughly. The man quickly picks her up and carries her to another room, trying to hurry, so they won't be caught by the male lead. The male lead is carrying the hot water with the bartender. He takes the other bucket from the man, telling him that is slow. With both buckets in his hands, he walks down the road. He passes the man and the bartender, who talk quietly. The man asks the bartender why the male lead hasn't passed out yet from the effect of the drink. The bartender just shrugs and says he doesn't know why the drink hasn't worked on him. The male lead reaches the door and knocks, calling out for our girl. When no one answers and the door doesn't open, he instantly feels something is wrong. Without hesitation, he breaks the door open and looks around, but she's nowhere to be found. Just then, the man who attacked our girl comes at him, but the male lead is quick enough to stop him. He asks if it was him, drops him to the floor, and grabs the bartender by the shirt, demanding answers. Meanwhile, our girl is lying unconscious in a carriage, being taken away by the woman. The carriage eventually stops, and the woman tells the driver to be careful while they rest and wait for the others. She enters the carriage and checks on our girl, still unconscious. She gently lifts her up and gives her a drink, saying they can't let her get thirsty. After a moment, she mentions that the ride has been bumpy, and that it's better for our girl to change clothes so she won't attract attention. As she starts to undress her, she notices a strange mark on our girl's shoulder. She touches it, and it feels incredibly hot. Surprised, she pulls her hand away quickly, but she's still curious. The mark feels strange, almost creepy, but she decides to ignore it for now and focus on changing our girl's clothes. After changing her clothes, the woman looks at our girl, but she's still unconscious. The woman looks at our girl now, saying that she looks like a refugee. She thinks this will help her avoid drawing too much attention. She picks up the dress our girl was wearing and inspects it. She can tell it's made of good material, so it must still be valuable. She then picks up the crown, curious about it, and sees that it's made of wood. She wonders why someone like her would be wearing such a cheap wooden crown. Annoyed, she throws it away. Just then, the man enters and asks if she's finished. She says yes, then touches our girl's face, commenting on how beautiful she is. The man says it would be a waste to sell her, but the woman quickly tells him to go away, and not get any funny ideas. She asks him to check if the other man, Scarface, has returned, saying she's confused about why it's taking so long. Back at the tavern, the male lead is still dealing with the two men. He chokes Scarface and demands to know where our girl is. Scarface finally tells him that they went south. The male lead asks him for the exact location, and Scarface replies that they are heading to the Gumani territory. The male lead knows that this place is full of dangerous trolls, and Scarface wants him to go there and die. He senses that it's a trap, but the male lead isn't sure if Scarface is telling the truth. After torturing him for a while, he stops. Outside, the male lead stands still, thinking about our girl. He knows she has his mark, so he can feel that she's still alive. He wonders where she could be taken, and then he remembers her mentioning the Gumani territory before. He wonders if it's really the place. He decides he can't waste any more time. He gets on his horse and rides off, determined to find her quickly. Meanwhile, in the carriage, our girl finally wakes up. Our girl is tied up, and her head feels heavy. She starts to wonder where she is. As she looks around, she realizes with a shock that she's been kidnapped. She notices that it's not the tavern anymore, but instead, she's inside a carriage. She spots her flower crown on the floor near her. She knows the male lead isn't with her. If he were, no one would be able to hurt her. She quickly thinks of a plan to leave clues for him. She starts pulling the little fruits from her crown and dropping them outside the moving carriage. A young child, walking nearby, sees the edible berries falling and picks them up. She tastes them and finds them delicious. After some time, the carriage stops, and the little kid is still following closely behind. Our girl stops dropping the berries, realizing that the child is still eating them. The kid looks worried. Our girl, peeking through the curtain, is surprised to see the child. She didn't expect the berries to attract the hungry kid instead of the male lead. She quickly hides, not wanting the child to see what's happening. It could be dangerous for both of them. The child gets closer to the carriage, but suddenly, the carriage rider catches her. He says that another lamb has come to his door. He opens the carriage and places the small girl inside. He then tells our girl that he has brought her a new playmate. Our girl recognizes the child. It's the same girl who told her earlier about the man-eating monsters in the north. The girl also recognizes her as the older one who asked about the dangers up north. Our girl feels terrible. She blames herself for everything. She didn't think things through and ended up causing trouble for the kid. She's angry at her captors for going after children. The little girl is panicking, and our girl tries to calm her down the best she can, but both of them are tied up, and their mouths are gagged with cloths. It's hard to comfort her when they can't speak. The woman comes in to check on them and sees the little girl. She's clearly not happy about it and starts yelling at the rider, asking him if he has any sense at all. She complains that Scar and his gang still haven't shown up, and she's worried that something's gone wrong. On top of that, he's made things worse by capturing a little kid. The rider tries to explain that the child came on her own, but the woman is not having it. She tells him that they don't take kids, and what does he think? That they're keeping them for retirement or something. The rider stubbornly refuses to admit his mistake, and the woman tells him that if he keeps arguing, she'll deal with him first. She looks inside the carriage, clearly stressed and tired from the situation. Our girl tries to say something, but nothing comes out. She wishes they would just let the kid go. The woman comments that the child's parents will definitely come looking for her soon, so she tells the rider to throw the kid out after a while. She figures that if it's not too far, the parents will find her. She insists that they can't wait around for Scar, and should keep moving. Not far from them, the kid's grandpa is calling for her, looking around for any sign of where she might have gone. From the carriage, our girl sees him, and she knows he's in danger. The little girl tries to shout for her grandpa, but no sound comes out because of the gag. The rider pulls out a knife and tells the woman that if she's worried the parents will come looking, he'll just deal with the old man. Before the woman can stop him, the rider walks toward the old man and kills him. Our girl is furious. She calls him cruel under her breath, vowing never to forgive him for what he just did. The woman screams at the rider to hurry up and get them out of there. Our girl is really angry with the rider. She tells him that he should go straight to the Trank Kingdom. As they leave, she throws her crown away. She hopes the male lead will find it and use it to locate her. She thinks about him, wishing he would hurry up and find her soon. Meanwhile, the male lead is riding towards the Gun Amy territory, completely unaware that the carriage carrying our girl is headed in the opposite direction. As he's riding fast on his horse, he notices something out of the corner of his eye, a suspicious branch. He stops suddenly and wonders what it is. He feels like there's something off about the tree he's seeing near the camp. There's a familiar, annoying feeling about it. He remembers the time he was lashed by a branch, just like this a few nights ago. He starts to wonder if it's the tree crown. The horse also seems to remember something from that night, too, and it seems like an exciting memory. The male lead is now sure that it's the same old tree crown. Without hesitation, he urges the horse to move quickly in the other direction. He's convinced that our girl left the crown there for him. It makes him feel that she loves him so much. Soon enough, they reach the spot and his suspicion is confirmed. He finds the crown lying on the ground. He picks it up and directs the horse east. The horse speeds up as they head off. Meanwhile, the woman stops the carriage in a certain spot. She gets the little girl out and tells her that the temporary camp isn't too far. She says if the girl just follows the main road, she will get there. Our girl struggles, trying to say something, but no sound comes out. The woman removes the cloth covering our girl's mouth and asks what she wants to say. Our girl tells her that the little girl can't be alone, that her only family is her grandpa. The woman is surprised. She turns to the rider and starts yelling at him for causing all this trouble. Our girl asks where they're planning to take her. The woman looks at her for a moment before answering, saying that a delicate beauty like her will fetch a good price with the nobles of the Trank Kingdom. Our girl starts to think deeply. She remembers that the King of Trank has a bad reputation, and so do those in power there. Whether she's a commoner or an exiled princess, it won't end well for anyone. The little girl starts to cry. The woman tells her to stop crying and says they need to leave quickly. Our girl begs the woman not to abandon the child. She says the little girl has no other family and won't survive if she's left alone. The woman tells her that it's already hard enough for ordinary people to survive. She says she's already let the girl go, and that the rest is up to fate. Our girl keeps begging, but suddenly, an arrow flies past them, slicing through the air with deadly speed. Both of them freeze for a moment, instinctively alert. The woman quickly turns around, her eyes scanning for where the arrow came from. Her gaze lands on a young man holding a bow, the string still vibrating from the arrow he just shot. He stands tall and confident, his posture straight, looking like someone who's in charge. Around him, there are several armed men, all wearing matching armor, clearly his personal guards. The men address him with respect, calling him young master. Their voices are firm, showing their loyalty and readiness to follow his orders. The young man lowers his bow, but keeps his sharp eyes on them, watching closely. Without dropping his guard, he steps forward, his guards following right behind him, their hands resting on their weapons. He stops a few steps away, his brow slightly furrowed, his eyes moving between the two women and the carriage, suspicion clearly showing on his face. His voice is calm, but curious as he asks what's going on. He lists a few possibilities aloud, wondering if it's a kidnapping, a ransom, or maybe a dispute over stolen goods. His tone shows he's used to seeing this kind of thing, and maybe even being involved in it himself. Our girl watches him closely, narrowing her eyes. His clothes are rich, made from fine fabrics with intricate patterns sewn into them. The crest on his cloak is clear, a symbol of noble status from the Trank Kingdom. Her heart tightens as unease fills her. She remembers the bad reputation the nobles of Trank have, known for their cruelty and greed. The stories she's heard make her hesitate, and a wave of fear creeps over her. Her instincts scream at her to stay quiet, not to trust him, but another part of her wonders if calling for help might be their only chance at survival. She feels a mix of fear and uncertainty as she grips the edge of her sleeve tightly. She knows she has to choose carefully, one wrong move could be disastrous. Before she can make up her mind, the young man moves quickly. He steps forward and, without waiting for an invitation, opens the carriage door with ease. His eyes widen slightly as he takes in the sight of the woman inside. His expression softens, and a look of admiration crosses his face. Despite her disheveled appearance, she doesn't lose her beauty. In fact, it seems to make him more intrigued. He leans in a little, his voice dropping to a smoother, more charming tone as he speaks. He says aloud how strange it is that someone would tie up such a beautiful woman. His gaze lingers on her, a mix of curiosity and interest in his eyes. There's something unsettling about the way he looks at her, as if he sees her as something to possess. Before he can say anything else, something small and fast flies through the air and hits the side of his face with a sharp thud. His head jerks a little from the impact, and for a moment, no one moves. One of his guards steps forward, his hand resting on his sword, but the young man raises a hand to stop him. He touches the spot on his face where he was hit, still not fully processing what just happened. Our girl's breath catches in her throat when she sees what's lying on the ground near his feet. It's the forest flower crown, simple but meaningful, something she thought was lost forever. The petals are slightly crushed from the throw, but its significance hits her harder than anything else. For a moment, everything feels like it stops as she stares at the familiar object, memories flooding her mind, while doubt fills her heart. If you're eager for the next chapter, drop a comment expressing your interest in a part 3. Don't forget to subscribe and ensure to hit the notification bell to stay updated. Until next time.